It's Goku, but it's not Goku. But it's totally Goku, but it's not the Goku you know, It's Dragon Ball Dissection, and I don't even know what's going on anymore. Goku's side story, Sushinshu is a Testament to Courage, aired on March 26, 1997. Dragon Ball GT's one and only special, it tells the story of our Son Goku's great-great-grandson, also named Son Goku, as he undertakes a journey to save his beloved grandma, our now elderly Pan. As far as Dragon Ball specials go, this takes a page out of Dragon Ball Z's own A Final Solitary Battle, the father of Z warrior Son Goku who challenged Frieza. Jeez, even by Dragon Ball standards that title is wordy. It sets a story outside of the immediate events of the series, jumping to a far different time. And to offset that disconnect from the established Dragon world, it stars another Goku clone, also voiced by Nozawa Masako. Son Goku Jr. even wears a red bandana like his great-great-great-grandfather Bardock. Goku, and for simplicity's sake I'm going to refer to the protagonist of this story as Goku from now on, is a timid boy, far more like Pan's father than his actual namesake. However, Grandma Pan insists that Goku has what it takes to live up to his legacy. When she's stricken by a bad case of being incredibly old, Goku has to believe in the Dragon Ball legend and conquer his fears to hopefully save her. This is a fairly standard coming-of-age story. It's a kid who goes on a journey, both physical and metaphorical, finds courage and becomes a stronger person because of it. It's far more Stand By Me than Dragon Ball, but that's kind of what's interesting about it. While there are certainly parallels to Gohan's, especially animated Gohan's development way back in the Saiyan arc, Dragon Ball doesn't typically tell stories like this. Even Gohan was placed in very extraordinary circumstances against his will. This Goku is a character who goes to school, deals with bullies, plays video games. When I covered the Majin Buu arc, I talked about how Goten and Trunks feel more like real kids than prior Dragon Ball children had, but they have nothing on Goku, who is normal through and through. Remember that Toriyama, from the very beginning, designed Hoi Poi capsules so that his characters didn't have to carry stuff around on their adventures. This story devotes a decent chunk of its drama to managing supplies. And Goku is primarily a protagonist who isn't a combatant. He runs, he thinks, he explores, he panics, but he typically navigates obstacles in ways that don't involve fighting. As the title implies, Goku's journey is about finding courage, not becoming a strong boy, with a notable exception we'll get to later. As such, I can't help but find this a refreshing change of pace for Dragon Ball. In fact, I can really only think of one other Dragon Ball story that seems to follow in this one's footsteps. It features a bullied protagonist, he lives in a modern world and goes to a modern school, he has a martial artist grandparent trying to teach him the old ways. When that grandparent is taken out of the story, the timid guy has to strap on a giant backpack and go off into the world on a Dragon Ball quest. Yay, I just ruined this for everybody. As long as I'm upending people's perceptions of things, this is not a movie. It's a double-length television special that aired as an episode of Dragon Ball GT. Misinformation about Dragon Ball, especially in the English-speaking world, is fairly easy to come by, so it's good to understand what things are. This story, as well as Bardock and Trunks, are not the same as the 17 theatrical films that were also released concurrently throughout the run of animated Dragon Ball. Dragon Ball GT never got a theatrical film under its own branding. That's why I referred to the 10th anniversary movie as the closest we have to a GT movie, given that it was released under GT's production, promoted by GT, used GT's art style, gave Goku his GT design, used GT's theme song, and introduced musical tracks that were later incorporated into GT. That's all consistent with how the Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z films tied into their respective shows. Now, I don't really want to be that much of a pedant when it comes to the term movie and what should or shouldn't qualify as one. We use the term movie to refer to television exclusive features all the time. Frankly, these DB productions somewhat blur the line as to what's a film and what's an episode. Specials tend to look like upper-tier episodes, while movies, ideally, are a little more polished, but they're both on the high end of what you can expect from this franchise at this point in time. Most of these so-called movies only end up about as long as a double-length episode anyway. As far as narratives are concerned, the specials tend to be far more ambitious and standalone, more what you'd expect a movie to be, especially compared to those flash-in-the-pan Dragon Ball Z movies. Aside from actual movies creating assets like music that are later recycled into the series, the only tangible difference between a movie and a special under these circumstances is where they premiered. So I'm not bringing this up to rub your noses in how much better educated about Dragon Ball I am. It's just that when stripped of their original context, viewed primarily on the same televisions or computer screens, and lumped under the same label of movie, you end up losing that history and nuance. And it's hard to have a conversation when we're not all on the same page. Ever since I made my Dragon Ball dissection on the 10th anniversary movie, I've had people questioning the status of this story, wondering why I seemingly wasn't including this. I hate to have to say it, but Funimation, or rather Crunchyroll now, I guess, is historically not a good source for accurate Dragon Ball information. That's not a dig at them, it's just the truth. The same confusion holds true for where this story goes. I've seen commenters shocked that I'd be covering it here, now, as opposed to after Dragon Ball GT. You buy the DVDs and this is just tucked away at the end. That's more context that's lost. It's particularly interesting here as the world set up in this special makes a comeback in the final episode of GT, showing what happens to Goku Jr. after these events. Placing the special after the series fundamentally alters that narrative, from the epilogue of the series following up on this, to the special becoming a prequel used to explain the end of the series. It's fascinating how differently this can be interpreted based on when you see it. But yes, this special aired precisely where we are right now, 2 weeks after the tournament episode and 3 weeks before the proper introduction of the Super Number 17 arc. I think that goes to show how much Dragon Ball GT was being preempted by this point. Things aren't looking good for this series. But in addition to the documented timing of its creation and release, the special opens by stating its exact context. That is to say, it opens with a recap of the Baby arc. It frequently references those events. Pan tells Goku the story of the Dragon Balls through her experiences with the ones she went out into space to find, not the classic ones. It doesn't talk about any story after that because they didn't exist. There is no mention of evil dragons, no reference to the original Goku's ultimate fate within the series, other than the obvious fact that he's gone by this point in time. And, considering when this takes place, that should be a given, not necessarily a reference to a grand ethereal destiny. It's likely the finale was written with this story in mind, so it's easy to connect the dots, especially given how this story seemingly links the Elder Goku with the Dragon Balls. Regardless, it's clear this special was created as a direct follow-up to the Baby arc, not this as a follow-up to the series. That's enough production stuff, let's get back to the story. Pan is trying to raise Goku up to be strong, but he can't even catch a ball, which apparently has some connection to the stuff they did in space. Pan insists her grandpa was really good at that kind of stuff, but I don't know. I have a hard time picturing what that would look like, don't you? It seems like Pan's about ready to put him up for adoption, but then she suffers a medical malady known in scientific circles as being ashamed of your grandson, forcing Goku to toughen up. He vaguely remembers Pan telling him about her adventures in space, and decides that finding this Dragon Ball thing on Mount Paozu is the key to saving his grandmother. I'm honestly not sure if this confusion is a result of Goku not having been paying attention, or simply because distinguishing between singular and plural is fairly vague in Japanese. Why not both? Tracking down a singular Dragon Ball makes for a rather small-scale adventure, going from point A to point B, and honestly, that's good. Too many of these standalone DB adventures try to cram far too much in, forgetting it isn't a serialized story that can take its time. So this quest doesn't feel rushed. Instead, it's able to dig into quite a few set pieces along the way. Not having pacing issues is a standard of quality I'm not necessarily used to, but good pacing is also more common with the specials than the movies. As a bit of trivia, I want to point out Goku's and Pan's home has a mailbox emblazoned with drawings of themselves accompanied by the word Son. Is this the closest we get to confirming that Pan actually uses that surname for herself? Is her full name Son Pan? The hurdles Goku has to face at first are much more relatable than most Dragon Ball plots. He has to walk everywhere or rely on conventional transportation. The truck driver who picks him up steals his food. Goku doesn't feel like an invincible hero, he feels like a child who's just doing the best he can. Eventually he teams up with Puck, his main bully, and they get into some shoplifting and high-speed chases. It wasn't until I heard Puck scream, "Goku!" that I realized that he's played by Furuya Toru, Yamcha's voice actor. I like that. If you're not going to use Yamcha, at least don't waste your Furuya. He's a national treasure. What I like about Puck is that he too conforms to this down-to-earth philosophy. There isn't some big dramatic moment that sways him over to Goku's side. He's just bored, and sees Goku doing something more interesting than he's doing, so he decides to tag along. He's not an evil person, he's just a child. As such, his antagonism is resolved in a fairly mundane way, and that makes him seem real. Puck's definitely a more active character than Goku, and he pushes Goku to be bolder. He teaches Goku the oddly specific lesson of not trusting nice strangers, which just happens to come back up again. A child-eating demon, so yeah, the threats have escalated by this point. A child-eating demon, Mamba, disguised as a kind lady, saves them from ravenous wolves and invites them back to her house. She would have stabbed them in their beds had Goku not remembered that earlier lesson. Ultimately, Puck falls into a ravine while trying to save Goku, poor dolt, which dumps quite a bit of guilt on Goku he has to get over in the final act of the story. By the time the demons attack again, Goku has made friends with a bear family. Now he has to put his courage to the test to protect them, just as they endanger themselves to save him. Here's where the story kinda loses its own convictions. Goku saves the day by turning into a Super Saiyan. Good grief. Even in a special so small scale that a significant roadblock is being touched with pea hands, the lead character still has to become a Super Saiyan. It feels so obligatory. Oh yeah, we gotta do the Dragon Ball thing, and no one's gonna know it's Dragon Ball if someone's hair doesn't change color. Jeez, could we let it go just this once? It's also far too much of a stretch. I don't particularly care if Super Saiyan's status is reduced to a joke if the joke is good. But maybe don't hand it off to someone who literally has no fighting skills whatsoever. The kid can't even catch a ball, which we've established is relevant for some reason. More importantly though, what does this have to do with Goku's journey? This isn't about him becoming a legendary warrior, it's about him finding the courage to carry on even when he's scared. In the hospital, Pan even tells him that true strength isn't about having strong power, it's about having the courage to do the right thing without worrying what the outcome will be. But, having superpowers helps too, I guess. This is fan service that ultimately serves to undermine the special's own message. Unfortunately, Goku has far more courage than the writers do. Oh, and this absolutely shoots in the foot the fan theory that Pan can't become a Super Saiyan because she's too much of an Earthling. Goku is, presumably, only 1/16th Saiyan, but that noble bloodline is enough to overcome his complete lack of experience. Blech. On top of that, Goku completely forgets the experience anyway, so it's basically the special admitting this is pointless outside of generating an action climax. Interestingly though, if you view this as a prequel to the finale, this special becomes recontextualized as the tale that explains how Goku Jr. became the Super Saiyan he appears as in that episode. And yeah, that's a lot less interesting a story, but it does make this moment feel somewhat relevant in the same sense that Gohan's Garlic Jr. moment knowingly nods to an audience that's already seen what he chronologically later does to Raditz. It also makes the message a little less comfortable for me. I'm all for a kid learning to believe in himself and standing up for himself against bullies, and I can believe that Pan wants that for him. However, when the end point of the journey is him becoming a Super Saiyan, it really makes it hard for me to ignore the weird red flags of Pan constantly comparing him to his great-great-grandfather. Is this about Goku becoming his best self? Or is it Pan forcing him into a role she's decided he's supposed to have? Ride on this log, get stronger, be cooler. I named you after this guy and it costs a lot of money to change your name to Weenie McWeenie Pants, so you'd better live up to that legacy. Goku needing to become a Super Saiyan to solve his problem seems to be the story validating that particular reading of her motivation. This transformation doesn't seem to be anything Goku cares about or is going to need. I'd rather he find his strength in a way that highlights his own sense of curiosity and compassion, rather than one that reinforces his similarity to the elder Goku. Interpreted that way, this seems to represent the worst aspect of fans who hate whenever Gohan is happy just for being a fulfilled nerd dad. Anyway, Goku makes it to the old Son Gohan house on Mount Paozu. It's difficult for me to be certain, but the later Son family home doesn't seem to exist here. I find that fascinating given the anime continuity's inconsistencies with where these characters live. Are we meant to believe they dismantled that house in order to move over to their later, i.e. manga continuity house? Or did the powers that be just wipe it from continuity entirely and are now trying to pretend it never existed? Who knows for sure? All I can say is the plot continues to thicken. Goku finds the Dragon Ball hidden away in the house, clearly placed there by someone with a strong sense of drama and epic quests of self-discovery, because there's really no other reason for it to be there. Goku thinks he has completed his quest, however praying to the ball for Pan to get better doesn't do anything. It doesn't summon Shenlong. Goku angrily throws the ball and it lands at the feet of Grandpa! Grandpa explains to him that he needs all 7, while praising Goku's strength and courage. This is the main thing that reads differently based on when you watch this, influencing whether you see this ending as literal or symbolic. Taking this with the context of the finale seems to suggest the elder Goku's role in regards to the Dragon Balls here is far more literal. But is that something the writing staff had in mind at this point? Or did this ending inspire them to lead the elder Goku to that point later down the line? Does the elder Goku literally use the power of the Dragon Balls to grant Goku's wishes? Or is it all symbolic? Personally, I really don't think it should matter. Finding the Dragon Ball was never the point. For once, the Dragon Ball is actually a MacGuffin. It doesn't do anything, it's not important. It just drives the story and motivates the lead character. This story is always about who Goku is as a person. Will he go on this quest? Will he face his fears? Will he turn back when the going gets tough? The Dragon Ball is simply the object that propels him forward, an object that he doesn't understand or even know how to use. As such, his external objective was always going to fail. It's a want versus need conflict. He wants a magical solution to save his grandmother. What he needs is to grow into a stronger person. Unfortunately, the story struggles a bit to reconcile both of those things, and so it just instantly fixes all of his problems. Pan and Puck show back up safe and sound in a police aircraft and they take Goku home. His journey is complete. I usually prefer ambiguity with things like this. Was that guy actually Santa Claus? Who can say? Since we're treating the power of the Dragon Ball as a bit less straightforward than usual, I would have liked if there was a plausible, mundane explanation for everything. I mean, it tries. I can certainly buy that time in the hospital lowered Pan's cholesterol or whatever, and she happened to go looking for Goku right then. But how did Goku's courage mend Puck's fractured skull? The kid fell into a bottomless ravine. I don't think this police helicopter just happened to be down there at the time to snatch him before he hit the ground. Puck's dead. He's dead, everybody. There's nothing we can do about it. A child died. And now Goku is dying of starvation and he's hallucinating all of his dead loved ones welcoming him into their cold embrace. It's like Rose at the end of Titanic. That's 2 more Titanic references than I ever expected to make in Dragon Ball Dissection. Also, why does this police vehicle make helicopter noises if it's a jet? 0 out of 10. Now, live-action Sailor Moon? That's a show that knows how to inappropriately use helicopter sound effects. I don't know if there's really much more to say about this. Aesthetically, this special is a nice fusion of old and new school design. For all of its city-living, school-attending, mini-mart robbing, highway hitchhiking mundanity, it also features spooky chateaus, demons, and wilderness exploration. It definitely gives me vibes of the Sleeping Princess and Devil's Castle, but updated for more modern Dragon Ball. And I definitely appreciate that. It's comfy, it's fun to watch, it's cute, it's inspiring, but while Sleeping Princess is one of my favorite standalone Dragon Ball adventures, it's fine. It's not bad, but it's not great. As I said, it gets a lot of mileage out of being a little less on the nose with Dragon Ball tropes, but it never really manages to rise above being a stock juvenile fantasy adventure. Compared to, say, the Bardock and Trunks specials, this ranks at a distant third. But at least it can hold its own in that good company. That still makes it more memorable than a lot of the actual Dragon Ball Z movies. So thanks for watching Dragon Ball Dissection. This has been Mr. Fusion. When DBD returns, it will be with the beginning proper of the Super number 17 arc. I'm sure this one will take a while. Number 17 returns. Hell opens. For the audience. This is gonna be wild, or massively disappointing, maybe both. If you can, please help support the channel through Patreon. Be sure to check out my recent video on how live-action Sailor Moon changed my life forever, and might likewise make you a convert to that franchise. I will see you next time!